Good afternoon, everybody. We will start with some housekeeping rules for the meeting. The meeting will be recorded as of now. The purpose of the recording is to make the recording available to the participants together with the presentations. And you see the link where these will be made available as soon as technically feasible. Also notice that the GDPR statement has been attached to the invitation. Please consult it if you need it. All the microphones for participants are turned off, and only panelists can unmute themselves. If you want to raise a question, please do so in the chat. We will address all the questions at the end of the presentations. So during the presentations, you can already start typing questions, and we will address them later on. When you type the question, please make sure that you address to all of them and not to an individual member of the chat. And finally, if you didn't join with your name, surname, entity, and member states, please identify yourself when you type a question. If we cannot identify yourself while we read your questions, we might not be able to answer you correctly. So please, if you type a question, first identify yourself. And with this, I will leave the floor to Nicola De Michelis, Director in DG Region.
Thank you, Stefano, and good afternoon to everybody. And thanks for joining us for this last, in fact, webinar on one of the chapters of the midterm review that the Commission has presented in April this year and was adopted a few weeks ago. The midterm review objective was to offer the possibilities to managing authorities of the programs co-financed by Cohesion Policy to redirect resources toward five big European issues and priority, one of which is energy in its different dimension, and you will hear from the people that know better the energy sector in a second. So the objective of today chat is really to dive in the four sub areas of the energy chapter of the midterm review to understand better what we expect from the reprogramming if you so decide to shift resources in that direction. You see the agenda of this meeting. After a short introduction, you will have the possibility to hear the colleagues from DG Ener and from DG Move presenting the four sub areas, as I said, on interconnectors, on transmission, distribution, and storage infrastructures, on the protection of critical energy infrastructures, and on recharging in infrastructures. At this stage, before letting our colleagues to intervene, let me just remind a few principles that should inspire and inform your reflection on the midterm review. The first is timing. The time left for the midterm review is now a couple of months, in the sense that all the proposal for modifying the program should reach the Commission by the 31st of December of this year. Moreover, if some of your programs do need these changes also to accelerate expenditure this year, the program amendments should reach us yesterday, meaning that you have this needs to happen very fast because we need some time also internally to process the amendments, approve them, and make the payments that are necessary to accelerate the expenditure for the 2025 targets. So this is about timing. About the principle, I really plead that in your reflection you consider the following. First of all, to be very pragmatic and realistic in what you do, in the sense that if you decide to shift resources to energy infrastructure or recharging infrastructure, be confident that you can implement those projects within the time frame that is left of cohesion policy. So do not plan big infrastructure that takes 10 years to be implemented, because obviously this is defying the very notion of this midterm review. So think of the time frame of cohesion policy and be pragmatic in that respect. Second, be simple, and what I mean by simple is that you will hear today some ideas on what we expect. Well, keep it simple in the sense, do not invent things that do not necessarily fall within the perimeter of what you will hear today, simply because this will require lengthy discussion to decide whether these things are falling or not within the perimeter of the infrastructure chapter of the midterm review. And finally, and this is important, it's very important, in fact, be sure that what you do is additional to what your program are already doing in these areas. So it's not enough to say, well, I have energy infrastructure investment in the programs already, and I'm simply calling them a midterm review. No, this is not going to work. What we expect, and this is the objective of the midterm review, is to do more in those five areas. And with this, I leave you to the principal advisor of DG Ener, Tudor Constantinescu, that will give you the energy angle to this conversation. Tudor.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Thank you, colleagues, and glad to be with all of you here today. As Nicola has underlined, this midterm review of the cohesion policy, it's a very important step in the whole process, and it's also very important for energy because it remains central to the EU objectives both in short and medium term. We are staying, of course, on course towards a 55% emission reduction target for 2030 with a clear roadmap and a pragmatic, flexible approach. We have proven that we can cut emissions without sacrificing growth, and this was important last year to notice that emissions from the energy sector went down by 10%, while the consumption energy went slightly up 1%. It is in this context that I like to underline even more the fact that the Commission remains fully committed to the clean transition, and the midterm review will support energy in this process. It's clear that there are significant investment and development needs for energy infrastructure for the coming decades in order to meet the energy and climate targets while ensuring adequacy, security of supply, autonomy, and also affordability of energy prices. And massive investments are necessary in grids, in interconnectors, in storage, in distribution grids as well, at EU level, at national and regional level. And both electrification, digitalization plans will support this energy transition. And it's important to put all these things together and in an integrated manner. I think it's something which I would like in particular to underline, because an integrated system approach is very important to achieve in the most cost-effective way our objectives. So therefore, improving efficiency, distributing and deploying renewables have to go hand in hand, and at the same time to support the energy system decarbonization. While of course, in order to achieve the maximum benefits, it's necessary in this context to strengthen the grids, to strengthen interconnectors, to secure the flow of energy across regions and across countries, and therefore this opportunity now should be tapped. The recent initiatives such as the Clean Industrial Deal and the Affordable Energy Action Plan highlighted the need to have interconnected, flexible, but also digitalized and smart grids. And the needs are huge. Only for high voltage transmission, it seems that until 2040 we need about 500 billion euros alone. So therefore, it's very important to have a coordinated approach and at the same time to ensure what Nicola was saying before, also complementarity, which is extremely important as an overarching principle. So member states should use EU funding and instruments in a complementary way. Allow me here to also mention that member states should use at the maximum the cohesion funding for energy infrastructure while ensuring complementarity with funding under Connecting Europe facility, what was done, with what projects have been identified in order to achieve maximum results, and also to respect the deadlines we have. The investments in interconnectors and transmission, distribution, storage infrastructure, deployment, and the recharging infrastructure will be critical for the whole energy system and will go hand in hand with the other energy investments which support decarbonization. My colleagues from the different units in charge in DGNR will present you all the details of the programs and the understanding of the different type of investments in this kind of energy infrastructure, and will of course be happy to answer your questions. I would like also to mention that we'll continue this discussion on 4-5 November in the context of the Energy and Management Authorities Network that will held here in Brussels. But I think now it's an excellent opportunity for which I thank again Nicola and the colleagues in DG Regio for organizing this event, this meeting with you today in order to share the information which could help you and could help all of us in our efforts of the energy transition. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Tudor. So now we start with the four presentations I mentioned at the beginning on the four sub-themes or sub-areas of the energy priority. I would ask colleagues to try to keep your presentation within 10 minutes more or less. And we will start with a presentation on interconnectors, and it's David Schäfer that will present that. David, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. Also from me, a welcome to this webinar. My name is David Schäfer. I'm the team leader for the Connecting Europe facility in DG Energy, working here in the infrastructure units. We will indeed now provide some context on the new specific objectives, and we start with the interconnectors. As an introduction, as we speak about interconnections, it's worth to also recall the EU energy infrastructure framework. And here we have put the main pillars of this framework on this slide. So the 10E regulation, it defines the trans-European networks of energy. These are certain corridors with flagship projects selected on them. These flagship projects are the so-called PCIs, so projects of common interest. These are the flagship projects within the European Union. And then there are the projects of mutual interest, the PMIs. They connect the EU to a third country. So these PCIs and PMIs, they are the key projects on the corridors set out in the 10E regulation. And this is an important pillar for cross-border energy infrastructure, so for interconnections in the EU, and to promote the internal energy market. Once PCIs and PMIs have been designated, they get access to the Connecting Europe facility, a funding instrument for the project categories of the Trans-European networks. So this is funding that is reserved for these PCIs and PMIs. They can apply, and around 1/3 of the PCIs and PMIs, they get support from the Connecting Europe facility. So speaking about interconnections, this is also an important funding instrument to be kept in mind. And obviously the policy framework is continuously developing. The Grid Action Plan was adopted by the Commission almost 2 years ago. It set out measures to further accelerate the deployment and the upgrade of grids. Many of these actions have been completed or are ongoing at the moment. And as the next step of the grid policy, the Commission will, before the end of the year, adopt the grids package, which also aims to further develop the policy framework on grids. Good. Then on the next slide, I zoom in a bit more detail on the Trans-European Energy Network, so the TEN-E. This is the framework mentioned before that aims to accelerate the deployment of cross-border energy infrastructure with its PCIs and PMIs. This is a precondition to further electrify, and this has then a strong impact on emission savings, so it helps to implement the European Green Deal. And it is also crucial for competitiveness. If further cross-border interconnections are provided, this will have a positive impact on energy prices. And as mentioned in the last one, the Connecting Europe facility provides funding for these trans-European energy networks. So this as an introduction of the policy framework on cross-border energy infrastructure. We can then move to the next slide. And as was mentioned before already by Tudor, investment needs are very large on energy infrastructure. Therefore, this new specific objective certainly is timely to address needs. In May 2022, the Commission adopted the Repower EU plan, and achieving the energy policy objectives and the climate objectives set out in the Repower EU plan would, based on the modeling, require 584 billion euro in grid investment by the end of the current decade. The Commission has then, in a guidance document, the guidance document on anticipatory investments, a little earlier this year, broken down what is needed for distribution and transmission grid developments until 2040. And here estimated the needs for distribution networks amount to 730 billion, and the needs for transmission grid developments to 472 billion until 2040. So the investment needs are very large, and therefore it's certainly topical to also take a fresh look what cohesion policy could contribute under this new specific objective. Can then move on to the next slide. If we go back one slide, should be, if you go forward one slide. Okay, well then it's this one indeed. I was irritated by the other slide shortly, but I continue here. So energy interconnectors. We start with this part on interconnections among the priorities set out in the specific objective. First thing to clarify, it speaks about energy interconnectors. What does this refer to? This refers primarily to electricity, but also hydrogen. Why primarily electricity? For electricity, we expect that there's a significant number of projects that are mature enough to be financed within the constraints of the timeline that was already presented. It is fully aligned with the policy objectives, and therefore it is a technology that fits very well to this specific objective. Hydrogen is also eligible under this specific objective. We would just remind you that likely under hydrogen the project timeline is slightly different. It is it will likely take longer to materialize. There are much less mature projects in hydrogen. So while it is eligible under this specific objective, in practice, we would assume there are much less projects in hydrogen than electricity. Good, and then also what is an interconnector? We should zoom in on this aspect. We've put here the definitions based on the electricity directive. Electricity interconnector is an equipment used to link electricity systems. What is important here is the cross-border element, so it is cross-border infrastructure. Within a single country, a transmission line within a single country, we would not call it interconnector. So interconnector is always a cross-border investment. For hydrogen interconnector, we have essentially the same definition when it comes to this cross-border element. This is from the gas directive, and a hydrogen interconnector is a transmission line which crosses or spans a border between member states for the purpose of connecting the national transmission system of those member states. So take away point that interconnectors are indeed always crossing a border. Okay, then what are possible considerations for project selection? A very important element here is the complementarity with other sources of EU funding. We spoke earlier, for instance, about the Connecting Europe facility. If a project has received a grant by the Connecting Europe facility, we would not recommend to also consider the project for cohesion funding. The complementarity would be questionable, and moreover, there would be a risk of double funding. So there we would advise to not promoting projects that already receive other EU funding. Also taking into account is a recovery and resilience facility, where it's always a bit difficult to track where the funding goes to exactly, given its performance-based nature, with an elevated risk of double funding. So these are considerations which we would encourage you to take them into account. Investments are also encouraged to follow an energy system integration approach. So the needs in the energy system are manifold. We have, for instance, significant investments are required for the absorption of increased renewables. And when selecting projects, it would be we would encourage to look at such investments from the perspective how the investment can best promote system integration in the energy system. What we heard earlier is the timeline of the multi-annual financial frameworks of the EU budget. I don't repeat that in detail, but keep it in mind that time is short. Therefore, we encourage to focus on really on mature project, which can be realized within the short time frame that is left. Good. Then we come in the next slide to a few examples. Here we have put one project as an example, the Interconnector 2. This is a new electricity interconnection between Malta and Sicily. It is financed by the ERDF with 165 million. The construction work is already ongoing. The project is expected to be commissioned in 2026, and this would be a typical example of an interconnector project that is financed by cohesion funding. Then looking at potential future projects, of course, there are many projects, and you know them best. What we've put here are 3 projects of common interest. So these flagship projects, they do not receive funding by the Connecting Europe facility at the moment. That means there is no risk of double funding. At the same time, these projects are mature. They have received the status as a project of common interest, and you could possibly consider them for under this new specific objective. So here's some very concrete suggestions for your consideration. Good. At this stage, I would hand over to my colleague Michaela for the following part of the presentation.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Michela Marasco. I also work at DG Ener in the unit which is responsible for infrastructures and regional cooperation. So David started presenting us the details of the first part of specific objective 2.12. And I'm taking over the second part. So it means that these specific objectives could support interconnection and the related transmission, distribution, storage, and supportive infrastructure. Next slide. I will firstly start with some definition that help us define what these infrastructure actually are. So the definitions, all the definitions concerning electricity are described in the Electricity Directive of 2019, while the elements on hydrogen, their definition has been given by the directive, the Hydrogen and Renewable Gases Directive of 2024. Starting with transmission infrastructure, in electricity, transmission can be defined as transporting of electricity on extra high voltage and high voltage interconnected system with a view to its delivery to the distributors, so to the distribution level, or to certain final customers, like for example, heavy industries. So just to do like steel production plant or chemical plants. They use this electricity at high voltage level. With regard to hydrogen, instead, transmission is a network of pipelines for the transport of hydrogen, in particular a network which in a sense goes from the hydrogen interconnectors or which is directly connected to hydrogen storage, hydrogen terminals, or two or more hydrogen interconnectors. So here we are looking at the big pipelines that go from the interconnector onwards to the storage. Next slide. Distribution. In electricity, distribution is described as the transport of electricity on high, medium, or low voltage level on distribution system with a view of its delivery to customers. For hydrogen, instead, distribution is a network of pipelines for the local or regional transport of hydrogens, which primarily serve the purpose of supplying directly connected customers and does not include hydrogen interconnectors. Next slide. So when it comes to storage infrastructure, the electricity directive, it's really quite general because it defines energy storage facilities in the electricity system as meaning a facility where energy storage occurs. I think what's interesting here in the framework of this new specific objective 2.12 is that we are not only looking at small scale, smart, very innovative storage systems, but for this specific objective, since the goal is to support the interconnectors, we're looking also at more traditional and large system storage. So for example, in one of the pictures, you see a hydro pump that is a possibility as well. Looking at hydrogen storage, it's defined by the gas directive as a facility used for the stocking of hydrogen of a high grade of purity, including the part of a hydrogen terminal, which is used for storage, or large hydrogen storage, in particular underground, but not only. Next slide. So what is important, I gave you the definition of what type of infrastructures could be considered under the specific objective, but a very important element is that they all need to be related to the interconnectors. What does this mean? Being related to the interconnector means that they need to allow the flow of energy between member states. This can be directly or indirectly, or within separate energy grids within the same member state, for example, from the island to the mainland. internal transmission and distribution network that have to have a link with the interconnectors, not physical, but they need to support the possibility of making full use of the interconnectors. So if I have to give you maybe a visual examples, you have an interconnector between two countries, and the infrastructure which is directly linked, the transmission infrastructure which is directly linked to it, might be perfectly adequate. But in any of the member states, there might be an element, a part of a transmission infrastructure which would need a reinforcement in order to make full use of the interconnector. Otherwise, it would act as a bottleneck. And that is potentially one infrastructure that can be considered as related transmission infrastructure. We've heard in a previous moment of this presentation how important timing is. So in principle, these specific objectives could look at the setup of transmission, distribution, and storage infrastructure from start, so new one. But we know that in terms of timing, that might create some challenges. And in terms of needs, we have to consider that when it comes to this infrastructure, needs are not only related to brand new connections, but they also very important in terms of expansion, reinforcement, and upgrading of existing infrastructures. And there is another element in the title, in the description of this specific objective, which is supportive infrastructure, which I think this is important because it actually broadens up the definition, not to just meaning the line in itself, the infrastructure in itself, but also very important improvement and upgrades on those lines, like, for example, improving climate resilience, improving the security aspect, whether it's a physical security of the infrastructure or cyber security, and adding any element of important elements of digitalization. Next slide. So like David has done for interconnectors, we also wanted to give you some examples of potential projects which regards internal infrastructures. So these are current PCIs, project of common interest, for which, because of their status, the cross-border added value, the cross-border relevance has already been proven. And in this case, they are mostly internal transmission line. These are projects which have not received CEF funding under CEF 1, which would otherwise make them ineligible because of the financial regulation, have not received any CEF funding for work, and have not received RRF either. So this project maybe can give you some ideas in case you want to look into potentially support them through this objective, because they already have less issues with regard to potential double funding, and still the link with interconnectors is in a sense established already by their status. With this, I have concluded my presentation. I'm looking forward to your question later on, and I'm passing the word to my colleague dealing with protection of critical energy infrastructures.
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you, Michela, for giving me the floor. My name is Christine Banken. I work also in DG Energy. I'm team leader for energy security and electricity in the unit dealing with energy security. If we could move to the next slide, please. Yes, thank you. I mean, this all started with the midterm review of the EU cohesion policy. I don't think I need to explain this all again, but one particular point here, of course, that my presentation will focus on is that it now also emphasizes the protection of critical energy infrastructure. So recognizing that protecting and securing those assets is vital for our energy security in the EU. If we look at the next slide, thank you. Here, of course, you might have the question, okay, but what do we mean by critical energy infrastructure? In simple terms, it refers to any asset, facility, equipment, network, or system that is essential for providing an essential service, in this case, energy. This is defined in the Critical Entities Resilience Directive, which sets the framework for protecting such infrastructure. It covers 11 sectors, not just energy. But in the energy sector, essential services include, for example, electricity supply, distribution and transmission, as well as also oil transmission and storage, gas supply, and increasingly also hydrogen production. This is a non-exhaustive list of essential services, so these are just some examples. And of course, protecting these assets is not just about preventing disruptions, it's also about ensuring that energy services remain reliable and continuous, even in the face of, for example, cyber threats, natural disasters, or other emergencies. Then next, let's look at the types of projects that can be funded under the midterm review. So funding is available for projects that enhance the protection and resilience of critical energy infrastructure. Operators of critical infrastructure are here the main beneficiaries. Fundable projects include, for example, the procurement of equipment and systems that strengthen both physical and cyber resilience, as well as also the deployment of backup systems to ensure continuity of operations. And the overarching goal with this is clear. It's to reinforce security, stability, and also reliability of our energy networks. In the next couple slides, I have compiled some examples for you of what could possibly be some measures, some protection measures. First, we look at physical security, which is of course a cornerstone of resilience. There are many ways to protect infrastructure, including monitoring and detection systems such as drones, video cameras, sensors, and also early warning systems. Anti-drone technology is also increasingly important. Then you also have physical barriers like bollards, fences, reinforced gates, and sandbags that can prevent, for example, unauthorized access. Critical elements like substations and transformers can be hardened to withstand attacks, and access control systems can help to ensure that only authorized personnel can enter sensitive areas. Together, these measures form a comprehensive defense against physical threats to energy infrastructure and could potentially be funded. In the next slide, we focus a little bit on backup systems, as they're a vital component of resilience, since they provide redundancy in case of equipment failure or an emergency. Some examples of backup solutions you can see in the slide. They could include mobile security centers, which can be deployed quickly to respond to emergencies in the field. Reserve emergency transformers that are ready to replace damaged units and maintain a stable and secure power flow. And then also contingency stocks for overhead lines or also for substations to ensure rapid repairs and restoration of service. And yes, basically to allow critical infrastructure to resume operations without delay. So these measures for backup systems are designed to minimize downtime and to guarantee the continuity of essential energy services, no matter for what reason there might have been a disruption. And then on my last slide already, I've compiled some possible measures for cybersecurity. These measures are, of course, also non-exhaustive and are just some examples for you. And I wanted to include cybersecurity as this is an increasingly critical component of energy infrastructure protection. Measures include, as you can see on the slide, access control. So, for example, using role-based permissions and multi-factor authentication to ensure only authorized personnel can access critical systems. Then network controls, such as firewalls, for example, or also intrusion detection systems to prevent unauthorized access and also to detect threats early. then use substations and control systems built with embedded cybersecurity protections from the ground up, so security by design. Also, the integration of physical sensors, so for example, door sensors, CCTV, vibration sensors, with cyber monitoring systems, so that it provides real-time alerts to potential security breaches. And then lastly, on the slide, IT software for security systems, such as, for example, anti-drone control systems, to protect both physical and digital assets. And here, these measures for cybersecurity are, of course, essential for safeguarding the energy system against cyber attacks, and to also combine with all the other measures I mentioned to ensure operational continuity. Thank you. That's all from my side.
David, Michaela, and Christine, thank you very much for covering the first three sub areas of the energy priority. I think that now we have the last presentation that look at the fourth element on recharging infrastructure. Kai, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
If you're there, the floor is yours.
Yes, you can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Good afternoon. My name is Kai Tullius. I'm a team leader in DG Move and responsible for alternative fuels infrastructure. So this is about the support for the deployment of electric recharging infrastructure in the EU. I will focus here very much on dedicated infrastructure for heavy-duty vehicles, so buses, coaches, and trucks, as this is an area with the most urgent need for investments. But even though the presentation then will be pretty much on HDVs, just wanted to make clear that car recharging remains, of course, eligible and remains also an investment and an important investment opportunity here, especially in rural areas and for slow charging in cities. When we look into car recharging, we already have more than 1 million publicly accessible recharging points for cars in the EU. And over the last 3 years, in fact, the recharging infrastructure grew 40% faster in terms of power output than the electric vehicle fleet. So that indicates that market forces actually work pretty well already in the car recharging market. But even though that is true, I think there are still loads of locations within the EU that are a little bit underserved. So there are locations that are not economically viable to operate for operators alone, be it because it's in rural areas with very low demand, but it can also be in residential areas, in cities where the business case is very often not really there because the amount of kilowatt hours sold per day is so little that it is economically very, very difficult to operate these charging stations without support. So funding in these very specific cases may still be very, very relevant also to help developing the charging infrastructure in those regions and to make sure that actually nobody is left behind here in the transport transition. So while we have, on the one hand, the whole car charging, where selective support is certainly still needed in certain areas, the picture is different for trucks because there we actually do have a pan-European need for financing for infrastructure for heavy-duty vehicles. Basically, the shift to zero-emission trucks, especially electric trucks, is driven by the CO2 standards that basically require car manufacturers, truck manufacturers to sell a certain amount of heavy-duty trucks, and really tough targets kick in 2030. So there's a lot of push now from the manufacturers to bring trucks into the market. Of course, they can only sell them if there is actually adequate infrastructure to charge. So here we are, unlike in the car segment where we have markets functioning that are reacting to the demand from the vehicles. Here we still in the chicken and egg problem. We do not really have trucks. Truck manufacturers cannot sell trucks in the absence of infrastructure. So what we need is an infrastructure development that goes ahead of the demand here. To support that, AFIR, so the regulation on the deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure, sets deployment targets for recharging infrastructure along the TEN-T network and in urban nodes, and also in multimodal passenger centers. As I said, the infrastructure must really be deployed here before the market kicks in, which means it's a great risk here for the investors, which we will also see actually in the interest rates they get into the market. So we really have a huge need here for helping promoters to de-risk their investments. And here we do have already measures in place at European level, mostly the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Facility. It provides substantive funding for these projects, especially along the TEN-T network. And then also the Clean Transport Corridor Initiative brings all the relevant stakeholders together to make sure that the project that we finance actually make it also off the ground, and actually that the deployment happens, which then also requires close cooperation, for example, with all the grid operators. So here's really the link also to the presentations we heard before, to the electricity grid that actually needs to grow as well to support here the electrification of transport. Next slide, please. Just to illustrate where we are at the moment, we have more than 11 million electric cars on our roads, and as I said, more than 1 million recharging points for these cars. The development of electric trucks and buses here has basically just started. And especially for trucks, it's really in the initial phase. We currently have around 20,000 trucks on European roads, and the share in new registrations is about 4%. That's still pretty low. Compare it with car registrations that are at almost 20% and already at a 4% share in the total fleet. But it's also important to note that in certain segments and in certain member states, we actually see a lot of dynamics here in the market. In the Netherlands, for example, in the urban delivery truck market, more than 70% of new registrations are electric, and that is pretty much driven in the Netherlands by urban access restrictions for non-zero emission trucks. So markets are developing, but we are really in the initial phase. For buses, we actually started the development earlier, and we are now at around 30,000 electric buses being deployed by our public transport companies. And almost 1 in 4 buses today is actually, of the new registration, is now electric. And here we actually expect to go much, much faster and reach 90% in the registrations in the 2030s. Next slide, please. Our main funding instrument here to support recharging is AFIF, so the Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Facility. It's a specific facility under the Connecting Europe facility. It basically had 2 phases. So on the first phase, we spent 1.3 billion euros on 131 projects, in total of 24,000 recharging points of 150 kilowatt and 2,500 of 350 kilowatt, and those 350 kilowatt being especially relevant for trucks that actually need a substantial amount of power. So on a 350 kilowatt, one can charge a truck in around an hour or so. We also supported the electrification of 23 bus depots, and AFIF also supports electrification in airports and onshore power supply in maritime ports as well as hydrogen infrastructure. So it's a huge program. And now in the second phase, when it comes to recharging, we move away from the 150 kilowatt, which is actually more dedicated to cars, to the higher power charging of 350 kilowatt or even higher, to support here especially the deployment of recharging points dedicated to heavy duty vehicles, also to meet the targets that we set in our regulations. Next slide, please. This provides you with an overview of where actually the recharging points of 350 kilowatt were located in the EU. So you see it's basically across the EU where we actually finance these stations. Next slide, please. Coming basically here to my last points and basically explaining a bit what is needed and where financing can be used. Decarbonization of freight transports here, the heavy duty sector remains very difficult in general, and support here is really needed. In order to meet the CO2 emission performance standards, the targets that we have for 2030, we expect to have more than 400,000 zero emission heavy duty vehicles in the EU, up from the 50,000 that we have right now. So this means massive investments, especially in the truck segment, where we expect to have around or more than 300,000 electric trucks in the EU within the next 5 years. As I said before, to get there, we absolutely must have recharging stations in place. And this goes for both. It goes for the highways to actually ensure that the long distance transport is being enabled. And here we expect the need of 30,000 recharging points by 2030. And that means 30,000 recharging points really dedicated to the recharging of heavy duty vehicles. But what we need also and in parallel is destination charging in urban areas, including in logistics centers and multimodal terminals, and overnight charging in depots. Recharging infrastructure is now a reinforced priority in the framework of the midterm review of the cohesion policies. And here the focus should be on investments in recharging on transport corridors, so complementing what we do under AFIF, and especially also in depots serving public interests, such as logistics centers and bus depots. And here recharging in these logistic hubs and in depots is actually expected to account for a majority of all the recharger needs for trucks and buses. So that, especially this charging in depots that serve a public interest, should be a priority here for the cohesion policies. And here we talk about massive investments as well. Just look at a big bus depot in the city that may have 200 buses. Such a depot would need up to 200 recharging points of 50 kilowatt power output on the one hand, and that's just really the recharging need for the buses, plus it actually needs a connection to the electricity grid of 10 megawatt. So that might also actually really need a reinforcement of the electricity grid here to actually serve the depot with its massive power needs. So this is really the priorities we see here to actually help the recharging developed or help that the recharging for heavy duty vehicles, be it trucks or buses, develops quickly so that the electric vehicles can enter into the market and also basically allow here the transport operators to get good access to affordable recharging in the area. So actually also making sure that we see a positive total cost of ownership's development here for investment in electric cars to basically also here accelerate the fleet transition towards zero emission vehicles with the related benefits also for the local areas. So that's basically here the overall priorities from our side. Urgent priority for us, certainly the trucks, but certainly also car infrastructure, especially in rural and in urban areas. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Kai. Thanks to you all. Now we set aside 45, whatever is needed, in fact, to respond to your initial questions. You know the rule, you write your questions in the chat and we will try to respond both from the colleagues here from DG Regio and the colleagues from DG Ener and DG Move. So I don't know whether we have already some first questions, concern, clarification.
We have a question on charging infrastructure.
One question.
Quite a long one.
Could ask. She cannot come straight into the.
Jerome, can you read it out loud and see whether you can also?
Yes, Ursula, and I think she's from Estonia, asks how to solve the problem of financing the charging infrastructure for electric heavy-duty vehicles where we have a market failure. We must comply with A4 requirements, but businesses are not interested in installing charging infrastructure for electric heavy-duty vehicles in the necessary locations because EU state aid rules are an obstacle and the potential support offered, domestic CO2 quota sales funds, is so small that it is of no interest to businesses. We have already had some unsuccessful application calls. Companies do not see the investment as worthwhile. The biggest cost of the investment is connecting to the electricity grid. I don't know if Kai, if you can comment. I mean, I could think of I don't know if this is realistic, but financial instruments that could sort of supply loans rather than grants if you want to do something about the state aid issue. But.
Yeah, that's not an easy question to answer. I'm not so familiar here with state aid rules that this has become an issue or could be an issue, but happy to discuss that further. I presented AFIF as a funding instrument, and there we saw actually quite substantial interest of companies to invest, but it is true that the interest and also the application do not cover the whole of the EU. And here addressing Estonia, I think it is true that we didn't have a proposal that actually included Estonia here. So there are certainly issues, and some member states might come in a little bit later. What concerns AFIR, of course, AFIR review will take place in 2026. So I think here maybe we have to talk about and also look into funding opportunities that actually really bridge that gap. We are also in discussions here with the EIB about possible, what you just said, possible better financing instruments, better and easier access to financing to basically bridge the risk. And Of course, it is true that today we do not have the electric trucks on the road, and I know that there are very, very few in Estonia. But on the other hand, also the truck manufacturers are producing the vehicles. They are coming in the market. They are being pushed into the markets, and they actually have to be pushed into the market because of the CO2 standards. So I'm also convinced that the demand will come at some stage, and certainly by 2030 in all member states. But we will certainly have to look into better ways to actually ensure that the infrastructure develops really in all member states. Yeah.
Thank you, Kai. State aid is a recurring questions that we need to address. We will come back to you with a more informed reply after having consulted our colleagues in DG responsible for state, DG Com. Any other questions that are burning at this point in time on the presentation, or any other questions you may have connected to the midterm review in the field of energy? All right. Look, if there are no questions, because you're still digesting what is being presented to you this afternoon, be aware you always have the possibility to send your questions, remarks, comments to the functional mailbox of the unit here in DG Regio responsible for these matters. I don't know whether
I will put it in
Miriam will put it in the chat, so that if anything comes up, you may use that, and we will try to respond as fast as we can. If there are no more questions today, I will suggest we close it here. There you have the email address to which send your questions, and then
There's a new question.
There's a new question. Sorry.
So considering, could you please also identify yourself and type your name, surname, and entity, please? Considering the geographical eligibility of cohesion policy programs, with particular reference to national programs covering exclusively less developed regions of the relevant member states, example, Italy, the National Program Research Innovation, we request confirmation that project eligible under specific objective 2.12 may concern both the transmission network and the distribution network, or only one of the two, interconnection interventions not strictly related to the exchange of energy between member states, facilities, equipment, and systems that are geographically located according to the territorial eligibility of the program under which the projects are funded, provided that they are aimed at improving interconnection in terms of security and effectiveness, and are intended to increase national regional energy exchange capacity and contribute to overcoming bottlenecks, choke points in energy transmission distribution. Okay, so unpacking this question, first of all, indeed, both the transmission network and the distribution, or only one of the two, might be the targets of an action. As it was illustrated by our colleagues from DG Energy before, you can do transmission, distribution, storage, or supportive infrastructure on a broader scope, meaning all infrastructure that is needed actually to reach the goals of interconnection, so increasing the flow of energy across countries, member states, and integrating the energy systems in the EU. And indeed, an action might target only one of those aspects, so only distribution or only transmission. It is important, while doing so, to link the type of action that is selected to the overall goal of the specific objective. So it is related to interconnectors that was explained before. Interconnection interventions not strictly related to the exchange of energy between member states. So this is probably a misunderstanding of the definition of interconnection. As we've seen in the presentation, in the first presentation, interconnectors are infrastructure that cross member states. If this is not crossing a member state, this is an internal transmission line. And again, internal transmission lines are eligible under this specific objective. Then facilities, equipment, and systems provided that are aimed at supporting interconnectors. Yes, indeed, that is the definition of supported infrastructure. Whatever facilities or equipment or system that are needed and that are aimed at improving interconnections that are also eligible. Even, I mean, infrastructure that increase the national and regional exchange capacity. So those are internal transmission lines, basically, also eligible. And indeed that they contribute to all points that was already mentioned in the presentation. For more detailed assessment, we will refer you to our colleagues, program managers that are in charge of this program. Reach out to them, we will support them, and we will assess the details of the proposal. Thank you.
Let me just add one thing, just to avoid any misunderstanding. The midterm review does not change anything else than what is written in the regulation. So the geography of the programs, the eligibility of the expenditure, whether member states have organized through regional programs or national programs, this doesn't change. So please take into consideration the fact that the architecture of cohesion policy programs within a member state is a given, has not been modified by this by the midterm review. So there is no shifting of money between programs. That's what if this is behind one of the concern of this question. Any more questions?
Not.
No, very good. Unless colleagues from ENER Move have anything to add at this point in time.
No, nothing. Thank you very much. At least nothing from me.
All right. Thanks to you. Thanks to you. And with this, I suggest we close it here. Again, you have the functional mailbox in case you have some question comes up tonight, and we will reply to that. Thank you very much. Keep in mind, 31st of December 25, last moment to submit programs amendments that may eventually shift resources to energy interconnectors. And as somebody says, please think of projects that are mature, because you want to have the time at the end of 25 to start launching new things within the time frame of the policy. And so I think that what colleagues in ENER have done by suggesting some mature project is a useful inspiration for your reflections. Thank you very much. Thanks to all colleagues here and connected, and all the 60 and something participants to this webinar. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.